is the only reason you guys come, so hold on. So two guys are sitting next to each other in a pub. Who's laughing? I know it.
Irish pub.
Well, after a while, one guy looks at the other and says, I can't help but think from listening to you from Ireland. And the other guy responds proudly, yes, that I am. The first guy says, so am I. Whereabout from Ireland are you? And the other guy replies, I'm from Dublin. So am I, says the other guy. And what street do you live on in Dublin? I live on McCleary Street, in the old central part of town. The first guy says, what a small world. So did I. And to what school would you have been going as a child? The other guy answers, I went to St. Mary's. The first guy got really excited and says, so did I. Tell me, what year did you graduate? The guy answers, in 1964. For the love of the Lord must be smiling down upon us. I can hardly believe our good luck at winding up in the same bar tonight. Can you believe it? I myself graduated from St. Mary's in 1964. At this time, another guy walked in the bar and sits down and orders a beer, and the bartender walks over to him, shaking his head, and he mutters, it's going to be a long night tonight. And the guy asks, why do you say that? And the bartender answers, the Murphy twins are drunk again.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm so glad you appreciated that, because you guys don't know how much time I put. That takes me more time to find a joke that I think you'll appreciate than putting the whole dang meeting together. Thank you so much. So we do really have a great meeting for you here tonight. And first up, we're going to have Ben Hensel. We've had Ben the last two meetings, and I just love having Ben. He serves as the vice chairman of the Michigan Federation of College Republicans. He's the president of Turning Point USA at Wayne State University. And he's here again to share with us updates on what the college Republicans are doing. So please give a warm welcome.
So I have a few announcements as always. So three things from, the first thing, like Marion said, we've got Perry Johnson petitions to get him on the ballot. It's very important. We need 15,000. So if you want to help Perry out, go sign the petition, grab yourself a shirt. We've got all sizes, so that's you need not worry. The second item on the agenda, so I announced last month that the College Republicans of America, we have recently partnered with CPAC, and so with that, we're looking to send between 300 and 500 students to CPAC at the end of the month. We had a $30,000 fundraising goal, of which so far we have raised just over 15,000. So that has covered getting the ticket prices down as well as getting lodging down for those few days, because it seems every hotel in Dallas, they know CPAC's coming, so they jacked up the rates. And had we not done this partnership, not raised this money, it would have been so unaffordable to send students. So look out for Marion's email with more information. We're currently still seeking sponsors to make up that remaining 15,000. Every $50 guarantees one student can stay, guarantees a student's hotel for the week. And the third item on the agenda, so last month I announced that we are hosting, the Michigan College Republicans will be hosting the One Big Beautiful Gubernatorial Debate. But I couldn't tell you at that time, I couldn't tell you a date, time, or venue. So if you've got your calendars out, I give you permission to pull out the phones, so lock it in. It is Friday, April 10th at the University of Michigan's Rackham Auditorium. Doors open at 5:30, and the debate itself is from 7 to 9 p.m. Currently, for our moderators, we've got Miss Lena Epstein, who's running for University of Michigan Board of Regents. We love Lena, yes. And the always amazing James David Dixon.
Wow. Good job.
Thank you. As far as candidates that will be on the debate stage, so I'd like to just test the room. Who do we think is tentative?
John James.
Ding, ding, ding. So John James is tentative, but confirmed we've got Mike Cox, Eric Nesbitt, Tom Leonard, and Perry Johnson. So tickets will be $20 a piece, and we really hope to see you all there. It's going to be a great night. So it's Friday, April 10th. From 7 to 9 p.m. is the debate. Doors open at 5:30. And look out for the email again, Marion.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the venue? What was the venue?
And then the venue is University of Michigan's Rackham, Rackham Auditorium. Cool.
Have anything else?
So Ben, is there a way to sponsor a student to attend?
To attend CPAC.
No, that debate.
Oh, all of the students are getting it for free. Yep.
I was thinking the same thing about CPAC. Is a way to sponsor a student for CPAC.
Yes. So to sponsor a student for CPAC, it's $50 equals one student. Doesn't have to worry about any costs.
For a week?
Well, it's 4 days.
For 4 days?
Yeah.
$50?
Yep.
Hey, they're not Democrats, all right?
That's right.
Then $5,000. We
There
do
you go.
things economical here.
Yep. Bring out the bunks.
So how do they donate that $50?
So that $50, we have a WinRed link actively up to sponsor students. I'm going to send that to Marion to send out to each and every one of you,
Yeah,
and with the information on doing so.
I'll sponsor one.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else here want to commit to sponsoring a student? Go back there.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd do it.
Hema? So maybe we can start a list back there. It's like Lakes will sponsor 300.
That would be great.
Not 300 students,
Yes.
$300.
600. That's perfect.
That's
Thank you.
great.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
okay, great.
Tonight, the only candidate that we were able to join us is Kevin Kiefsky, who's running for AG. So, before I call Kevin up, we'd like to encourage you to remember that you represent people in your precinct. So this should not be solely based on your preference. You need to look at the whole picture and see who you think your precinct will elect. And I always kind of think like, who would Trump pick? And I think the president, I mean, like there's some picks that I really kind of scratch my head about, but I think he's looking at the big picture and looking at who can win. So I think that's very important to keep in mind when you're at convention and voting. So with that, I would like to welcome Kevin Kiefsky to the stage.
Who here is ready to make Michigan absolutely ruby red again? Yeah. There you go. So I'm going to only give my stump speech for a little bit because a lot of you have heard it before. So why am I running for Attorney General? 2 big reasons. Because I've had actually some notable victories against our awful Attorney General. Number 1, when it comes to Dana Nessel, she charged all the alternate electors with multiple felonies, try to lock them up in prison. One of those alternate electors is right over here. Marianne, let's give her a round of applause. I represented Cliff Ross, one of the other alternate electors, and we actually got some big news, breaking news, within the past, I would say now, 90 minutes. So Dana Nessel, she lost when I defeated her in court on September 9th of this past year. Well, today, about 90 minutes ago, she put out a statement, a press release, saying that I have decided now on the very last day ever to try to appeal these charges. I'm not going to go ahead and appeal. And I'm just like, well, you know, that's great, but also she didn't have a basis to actually have the case in the first place, period. So I want to thank Marion and all the other alternate electors for your witness. And guess what? We were able to go ahead and defeat her, and she'll never bring these charges ever again. Second, when it comes to COVID, you know, at that time I was the superintendent of the Archdiocese of Detroit. So 30 schools, I'm sorry, not 30 schools, I wish, 90 schools, 30,000 kiddos and 3,000 employees. November of 2020, she wanted to go ahead and shut down all the schools, all the high schools specifically, saying that they're super spreaders. And I'm like, this is a whole bunch of nonsense. So at that particular time as well, I was the vice chairman of MANS, the Michigan Association of Non-Public Schools. So what did we decide to do? We decided to go ahead and sue the governor in federal court in the Western District of Michigan. It's called Mans v. Gordon. And guess what? We got her to back down. I still remember that very day we were supposed to get our temporary restraining order against the governor where she would lose because the governor had an impromptu press conference. And what did the governor decide to do? She had her mask on, she had her sign language interpreter with the mask on and everything else. She goes up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the science and the evidence has changed. All the kids could go back to school. Wonder why? Because, of course, the governor was going to lose. The Democrats want to tell you what to think, where to go, what to believe in. They just really want to go ahead and tell you how your life needs to be, and that's not what I'm about. That's not what any attorney general should be about. What should the attorney general be about? 3 big things. Number 1, making sure that there's regular law and order, and more so there isn't any type of lawfare. You know, when it comes to the Attorney General's office, it's interesting. Ever since Dana Nessel took office, she increased the staffing in her office by almost 50%, and she ballooned the budget from about $105 million to almost $130 million. Are you any safer? No. The only thing that she has decided to do is to actually go after Marianne, all these other electors, and sue Donald Trump more than 45 times. Isn't that ridiculous? Of course it's ridiculous. The thing is, though, how about we actually just go back to the regular things that the Attorney General should be doing? And by the way, when it comes to criminal prosecutions, that's only 20% of the job of what the AG does. 80% of it is civil. The only particular charges that the Attorney General really brings would be like multi-jurisdictional crimes, where it's like multiple counties. The vast majority of the job is civil. So it goes after really the other 2 prongs of my platform. Second is restoring your constitutional rights and making sure that they're going to be protected at every turn. I can talk forever about that. I won't. But one thing in particular is the only Attorney General candidate to show up to the Michigan Board of Education when they wanted to make sure that all that LGBTQ stuff was going to be getting into your elementary kids' classrooms. I said to them, looking them straight in the eye, not only is that immoral, but it's illegal. You can't do that. I gave them a legal memorandum as well. And the thing is, though, we're going to be the 2nd state in the entire country to open up a parental and student rights division in the AG's office. The very first one is Florida. So we're going to make sure that when it comes to parental rights, parents are at the center of the education and the upbringing of their children, not the government, period. Second, constitutional rights, taking a look at specifically constitutional carry. You know, all these gubernatorial candidates are all wonderful. They want to have constitutional carry. You hear people in the legislature, they talk about bringing on constitutional carry. You know that the Attorney General can actually do it on their own? I kid you not. The only reason you actually have open carry is because of something called an Attorney General opinion. That's when the Attorney General, granted this is a while ago, said, you know what, I take a look at Article 1, Section 6 of the Michigan Constitution where it talks about the right to bear arms. And yeah, you don't have to have a license or a permit to actually go ahead and have a weapon that, as long as it's visible. You know who wrote that? Jennifer Granholm. Guess what? The law has developed since that time. So I'm going to update the Attorney General opinion so that whether it's open carry or concealed, we're going to become the 30th state in the entire country to have constitutional carry. You should not have to pay a fee or go through all this nonsense in order to protect your family, your friends, your community, your loved ones, anything like that. Okay? So we're going to get that done. And people that say, well, why didn't a prior Attorney General do that? Well, I don't know if they had the gumption or that they actually knew. But the bottom line is, we're going to get it done because I'm the fighter to do it for you. As well, when it comes to your constitutional rights, we're going to make sure that when it comes to anything that happens regarding the legislature, there isn't going to be any type of overreach. Why? because we're going to actually provide them the guidance that they need. I don't know if you heard about Speaker Hall. He cut like $650 million out of the budget, which was the right thing to do, waste, fraud, and abuse. And the thing is, though, I came to his defense on social media, and I still remember when President Trump came to town, he and I were talking about that for about 10 minutes. He's like, thanks, you're right on. Because when he came to the Attorney General, she tried to actually sue to stop all of this stuff. Okay? Ridiculous. Guess what ended up happening? Matt Hall won in court and got all that stuff dismissed. And he actually told me it'd be really much better for the legislature if you were the Attorney General. I'm like, I know, you know. The bottom line is, it's your money, it should be in your pocket, you get to keep it. And the third thing is, in terms of course, making sure that we have regular law and order, constitutional rights, is we get to election integrity. So when it comes to election integrity, a few different things. You know, I've been with the MFEI a few different times. They don't endorse, they're nonpartisan, okay? But what they want to do is to make sure that we have free and fair elections. Everything is being transparent. We're going to make sure that when it comes to audits, when it comes to paper trails, when it comes to actually only U.S. citizens voting, that's going to happen. You know why? Because I had conversations with lots of folks. One person who did endorse me is Dr. John Eastman, the president's attorney, back in 2020, and he used to clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court, and is probably one of the foremost constitutional experts. He said, in terms of my plans, we're going to make sure that, hey, that's going to happen here in Michigan. Let me know if I can help you out with that, okay? As well, when it comes to the U.S. citizen-only voting ballot initiative, I have to give you guys a round of applause because you signed those petitions, and guess what? It's going to be on that ballot. I still remember when that was announced over there at OCRP, Oakland County Republican Headquarters. I was the only AG candidate invited to go ahead and talk at the actual presser. I wrote an op-ed about that got into the Midwesterner, and I really tried to circulate those petitions as much as I could, because that's going to give the AG, in addition to the SOS or Secretary of State, the tools necessary in order to ensure that only U.S. citizens vote. Because right now, do you guys know that we have about 500,000 people on the voter rolls, more than actually eligible individuals, like 18 and over? So like, where are all these dead people at, or imaginary people, you know? As well, the Gateway Pundit, I don't know how many of you guys read that, but they endorsed my campaign as well. Patty McMurray, I don't know if she's here right now or not. But the thing is, though, when it comes to the Gateway Pundit, they know that I mean business, and I'm going to be able to deliver for Michigan. And God willing, we have a wonderful Secretary of State that's going to be a ruby red Republican, but just in case we have something go wrong, or if we have perhaps an independent as governor, we're going to hold their feet to the fire, and that really requires not criminal prosecutions, but it requires civil. Remember, when it comes to actually this job, 80% of it is civil. Only 20% is criminal. And in fact, I'll give you another interesting statistic. So if you take a look at all the Republican elected AGs across the country, and I met with them for about 4 days, meeting almost all of them in DC back in December, along with the White House for about 90 minutes. The interesting thing is, only 20% of them were ever an elected prosecutor previously. The thing is, though, you need to have someone with experience in both areas with wins. So with that being said, I'm here to make sure that we're going to be able to serve all 10 million plus here in Michigan, protect your constitutional rights, make sure we bring about election integrity, and certainly make sure that when it comes to the lawfare, it comes to an end. So with that being said, I don't think I did too bad with time, Marianne, but thank you so much for your kind attention. And if I could do one thing, because do we have time for Q&A or anything like that? Okay. Can I shoot a video with you guys really quickly? Like, it's going to be a selfie. I got to make sure I don't scream in the microphone. So I want to feature the Lakes Tea Party. I did this with Michigan State. I did this with a lot of different folks. Again, I'm just going to ask if you're ready to make Michigan red again. I just want you to be as loud as possible, okay? Make the people upstairs kind of like, what the heck is going on downstairs, okay? Hi, this is Kevin Kiefsky. I'm over here in Novi with the Lakes Tea Party, and guess what we're going to do? We're going to make Michigan absolutely ruby red again. Who's with me? Let's do it. Thank you very much.
Question.
Yeah.
So the voters in Detroit that do not vote, but they're they're voting for him. They're nice enough to vote for him. And we got a room full of people that didn't vote that they were voted for. We got physical live people that were voted for that said, we didn't vote, I can't even read. What are you talking about? You got that covered?
Oh, absolutely, because Patty McMurray has done a lot of great work in that area from the Gateway Pundit, and she actually has gone through about, I think, 40 to 50% of all of the FOIA documents that she got regarding these absentee ballots, more so the envelopes not being properly signed and other things.
Yeah.
So guess what we have to do? We're going to actually have to look into that. And not only just look into that, actually do something about it.
Hallelujah.
And that means doing an investigation that we would actually undertake right away, but also we don't have to start from scratch, because you take a look at Jay DeBoyer, who's the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. You got two great subcommittees that he has in that committee. Number one is the Lawfare, the House Weaponization Committee, and then the other one, or subcommittee I should say, and the other one's the Election Integrity Subcommittee. They've already have a lot of testimony, a lot of documents, subpoenas that were completed. I already spoke to both chair people, and they actually have said, yeah, we're going to give you all that stuff. So we don't have to start from scratch. As well, when it comes to Patty McMurray, I'm absolutely happy to take anything that they have found, because there's still more to be reported, and we're going to go ahead and take care of it, because only legal votes should count from actual human beings, not imaginary people. I mean, one thing that Patty McMurray spoke about, which I thought was amazing, and people laugh, but it's absolutely true. There's like 30 people that were registered to vote at a coffee shop in Detroit. It's ridiculous. And I think that Patty actually went to the coffee shop, and people are like, do people live here? What the hell is going on here? The bottom line is we have to investigate, and we have to make sure this never happens again, because there is no way that when it comes to your vote, I'm ever going to allow it to be diluted by people that simply don't exist, or they're not with us anymore, or anything like
They're
that.
the largest voting block in Michigan, Detroit, Wayne County.
Well, Wayne County is a very large voting block, right? But the thing is, though, if you take a look at that particular voting block, I think that when we look at the general election, we have a prime opportunity in order to pick up a lot of legal voters over there too. So we're going to be working there. We're going to be in Wayne County all the time. And we also have some folks from Wayne County here that are Republicans in this room. So thank you for coming out here, because I know it's kind of a lonely place over there. But the bottom line is we're going to be there in order to give you reinforcements to turn out that ruby red vote.
Another question?
Yeah.
Kevin, have you ever practiced in a government or a public sector legal office, like the prosecutor's office, a state or a federal agency, or city, county's attorney's office, or any large legal entity like that?
Well, I can say two things. Number one, no, I've never been an elected prosecutor or an assistant prosecuting attorney or anything like that. But in terms of the Archdiocese of Detroit, one thing I have done in terms of being superintendent, I also operated as general counsel. So I actually was wearing two hats at the same time. So that means all the HR, all the finance, all of the different government rules and regulations, that was me. And in fact, when it came to my boss, the guy that wore the big hat, the Archbishop of Detroit, he would actually send me to DC to meet with the U.S. Department of Education to work with individuals at US DOE as well regarding rules and policy. The bottom line is, when it comes to prosecutors, I have all the respect in the world for them. But again, the vast majority of the job is not being a prosecutor. Other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
Michigan having a lot of human trafficking and opioids, drugs. Have you worked with any lawsuits? Have you done anything with that in your experience?
No, I have not done anything regarding human trafficking for sure, because I've never been a prosecutor. But the thing is, though, when you take a look at human trafficking, that's something that can easily be taken care of if we actually just focused on that and actually cut all the lawfare nonsense. So you take a look at the AG's office, it's the largest law firm in the state. If we stop the lawfare and we make sure that people focus on the crimes that are multi-jurisdictional, and most of the time that would be human trafficking, then you're able to focus on that. But you also have to have someone with the willingness and the acumen to actually work with federal authorities as well, because this is not something that's just contained within the state of Michigan. You have to take a look and see actually what the heck is going on in DC so that we could partner with them. One thing I didn't talk about, but I'll just quickly mention, is sanctuary cities, right? Because sanctuary cities are dangerous for a number of different reasons, but one of the reasons as it relates to human trafficking is if you actually are trying to protect and not necessarily have ICE work in your jurisdiction, you know what ends up happening? You have all these victims of human trafficking that basically go unreported or undetected. That's a huge, huge problem. And I can say this, I'm the only Attorney General candidate in this race on either side that actually will take definitive action on sanctuary cities. I've said that time and time again. I said that at the AG debate that we had in Waterford. It's not an issue of local control. Some people say that. It's absolutely not. And in fact, Dr. John Eastman, the constitutional expert for the president, agrees with me because it is actually a due process violation in order to have a municipality or a city say, I'm not going to do anything about these illegal aliens at all. That's a huge problem. So what am I going to do? We're going to actually do an audit of all these different places, whether it's the People's Republic of Ann Arbor or the People's Republic of East Lansing. I got to be fair, you know. We're going to see where they're constitutionally deficient. We're going to let them know where their problems are at. And then finally, if they are not going to actually rectify the problem, then we're going to actually take legal action against them. Now, again, if this is a constitutional basis in which we sue. There is perhaps a statutory basis that could happen in the future. There isn't a statute to allow that, but you got the Constitution. Again, that's all civil. We got time for one more question? Okay. In the back?
I went to a church in Detroit. It's actually the church that the pastor spoke in Trump's inauguration. Anyway, that was political meeting right after the sermon, and the guy brought up that he said the city of Detroit is now charging a water fee to churches and treating it like a tax. And even though the churches are tax exempt, that they're putting churches out of business. I just didn't know if you could talk to that.
It's very interesting. This actually was something that was going on several years ago when I was superintendent. I won't talk about this ad nauseum because who wants to talk about water that much, right? But when it comes to that, it is just something that the Archdiocese of Detroit, with its churches, the Baptists, the Methodists, all the different organizations we're dealing with, you have to treat everyone equally. There are problems with overbilling, and there are problems with, frankly, not making sure that you're only getting the amount of money that you should have. I think that issue has largely been resolved, but at the same time, we got to make sure that we protect our places of worship because we should not be, as the government, if I do get elected or when I do get elected, in the business of putting churches out of business, okay? So we're going to protect all of that. But with that being said, I see that Marianne is up here. She has her cane because we have other speakers that need to talk. But thanks so much for your kind attention. Let's make Michigan red again. And thanks for your support at the endorsement convention.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming to visit us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
I think this was my third time here, so there you go.
Good job.
Thanks.
You gonna charge them rent?
I should. So I had hoped I was going to have more time to talk on this, but I really want to get to Eric Cardell. So I just want to give you a summary about this. I might have a speaker in on this next month because it's so disturbing. But on August 4th, voters are going to be asked to pass $125 million, this is Oakland County, tax increase with no plan and no accountability. This is going to cost the average homeowner at least $300 a year, okay? Michigan schools are already the highest per pupil, already have the highest per pupil funding in state history. Oakland County districts receive more than the state average. It's crazy. We're going to have a lot more information on this. I just wanted to ask you quickly, in order to help defeat this, I'm looking to see how many people here are on Nextdoor.
I'm on Nextdoor.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on Nextdoor because 12 days ago, I posted something on Nextdoor about this, and they have not taken it down. There have been hundreds, I'm receiving hundreds of comments about this every day. And 95% of them are outraged by this.
So I'm gonna be sending you guys an email. I'm gonna send you comments even. All you have to do is copy and paste to put this into your area. And let's see if we can get this continued in all the next door areas to educate people because they have no idea. This also feeds into, and I've talked to you about this before, permanent absentee. They count on us not knowing, and Matt Maddock actually has a bill on this that says you cannot pass a tax increase in an off election. They count on us missing the election, not knowing about the election, being too busy. That's why it's like I am on the bandwagon to get everyone to vote permanent absentee. Because the government then will notify you when there is a big election like this that will increase your taxes. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. They're like in this election, they have, I'm trying to think of the amount, I think it was like 5,000 employees that will go out and vote for this in Oakland County. So we end up in the hole because we don't even know there's an election. They count on you not knowing there's an election and not voting. But if you're on permanent absentee, the government has to notify you when you receive that ballot in the mail. Now, I know we don't like absentee, we don't like permanent. We want to vote one day voting. We're not there yet. And until we can gain control of the levers of government, we can't change that. So we have to vote this way in order to grab power to overdo and go back to one day voting paper ballots. Make sense?
Yeah. So
Okay, great.
we just gotta, you're gonna send an email, we're gonna copy that.
I'm gonna send a bunch of comments in it, and you can just copy whatever comments you want, keep feeding them into.
And post it
But don't do it at the top. Don't do it as a comment in the body. And wait every few days and put another one in. You'll be amazed at the reaction that you're gonna get. This has been going on for almost 2 weeks. I can't get over it.
And there's one other thing, Marion.
Yeah.
The public school enrollment across the state is down.
Oakland County is down by 1,000, and they're
Everywhere.
actually increasing staff. They're down 1,000, yet staff employment is going up. Good point. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on, but we'll have more. I'll have somebody in next month to even talk about this. So this is the perfect segue to tonight's main guest speaker. Americans increasingly recognize that fair and transparent elections are essential to preserving our rights to choose elected leaders and determine the future of our nation. The majority of U.S. citizens now understand that our elections have been corrupted. Our next speaker specializes in election law. Through his career, Eric Cardell has worked on numerous election-related matters. Through his legal practice, he has addressed grievances concerning election administration in key swing states, using the courts to challenge procedures. He can boast of 68 examples of election integrity successes, and I bet there's more than that. So Eric graduated from Harvard College on a U.S. Army Reserve Officers Training Corps scholarship. At the same time, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserves. He graduated from Harvard College in 1988, magna cum laude, honors in economics. He attended the University of Chicago Law School, where he met his present wife and only wife. That sounded funny, present wife. I'm sorry.
Present life, present wife.
Yes, present life and present wife. And they reside in St. Paul, Minneapolis, where together they have raised 8 children.
Maybe I start with confessing to you that I had a little bit of a personal trauma during Marion's Irish twins joke, because it brought back a memory that I'm not particularly proud of, but I have to share it with you because it's true. I have 8 children, but I'm one of 8 children, and I was raised in a Norwegian American household. I mean, we were so Norwegian. Part of it was my father's only sister grew up in Bergen, and so there was that connection. My parents spoke Norwegian when they were children, so we were like really Norwegian. And then recently, my oldest brother, Ivar, which is a Norwegian name, he took one of those DNA tests, and it came out 4% Irish. And so this was a real problem because the family was 100% Norwegian 100% of the time, and we had this data. So I was the one that was kind of protector of the family legacy, was that we've got to do something. And so I brought my brother Ivar, the 7 brothers and sisters, brought Ivar to an Irish pub. It was about the time of family reunion. And we went in there, we got our Guinness, and we raised our glasses, and I said, we were toasting to Ivar being 4% Irish. And so that's how we carry on. And I think there's a real thing there about family that's really important. And as I've been traveling across the swing states, I'm always reminded how important family is. And so let's keep that going in this organization and your own families. Now, this isn't the first time I've spoken to this group. Marion had me speak, I think, in 2021. And she's so great and awesome that she had the title of the talk, Michigan's in a death spiral and Eric's here to help. Well, ever since I've been helping. And so we're going to go over some successes. But before I start talking about myself, there are 3 people who are critical to our successes across the swing states since 2020. And one is Ron Hoyer, leader of the Wisconsin Voter Alliance. 2 is Heather Honey, the leader of the Pennsylvania Fair Elections. Now she's in the Trump administration working on election integrity. And 3rd, if she would stand, Patrice Johnson, the fantastic leader. Keep standing. She's standing, you gotta stand. I can do this because I'm speaking. So Patrice has done such a wonderful job covering the whole field of election integrity. And it's consistency, it's integrity, it's competency, it's all these things that have made Michigan a place where there are fairer elections than it would be without her. So thank you, Patrice. So let's just start with the Michigan Fair Elections big win this year is ranked choice voting was stopped. So if you're in a death spiral, you want to stop, right? And so Michigan Fair Elections defeated it, and I encourage Patrice to say that I had witnessed the difficulty with ranked choice voting everywhere, basically every city that's adopted it, and of course the disasters in Maine and Alaska, so it was the right thing to do. Also, there are some 3 big areas that the 3 swing state election integrity groups decided to do after the 2020 election. One was, the private money in election administration. 2 was the politicization of our campuses to get out students to vote. And then 3 was the association with Electronic Registration Information Center, where your driver data is shared with a liberal nonprofit and distributed to the other side. These are big billionaire finance programs at a national level to tilt the electorate towards the left. And we're still not done with the private money in election administration in Michigan, but after the 2020 election, in part due to our litigation around the issue in 8 states, the state laws were passed that banned private money in election administration, and it was a big win. It was getting so ridiculous that in some cities, it was $20, $30, $40 a voter, and that's what it cost to get an unregistered person to vote. So they were focusing on urban cities because they vote progressive. And so that was private money basically buying votes by changing the electorate. So those are big wins. The All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, that's the politicization here in Michigan of all your campuses. And the student information was being shared through the National Student Clearinghouse and this organization called NSOL, National Student Voting Learning Education Center, NSOL, something like that. And they were taking the student data, matching it to voting data, and then distributing it to left-wing organizations who would make sure that from cycle to cycle, the voting registration and voting rates on campus would increase. So at the bigger campuses like University of Michigan and so forth, you see that there are voting consistent with the general population for that age. But by the time they've been through these 3 or 4 or 5 election cycles, they're voting at twice the rate of the general population at that age. And so recently, Heather Honey and others thought like us, moved into the Trump administration, and Linda McMahon, the Secretary of the Department of Education, issued a warning to all the universities. They don't drop it, they threaten their federal funding, but most importantly, they went to the NSOLV, this agency that was getting the information, the National Student Clearinghouse, and said, these are FERPA violations, you're misusing student data, and they backed down. So that data now is not being transmitted to the university. So that means that there's an obstacle for them to achieve that program anymore. It was so massive. So that was a big win. You're probably talking 2 or 3% in some districts. So thank you so much. And so as we go down the victories, Electronic Registration Information Center, they were getting all the driver data. Now driver data is very valuable because driver data is very accurate. So we all seem to keep our mailing addresses and so forth accurate. Some of us might have even shared our email addresses or shared our phone numbers with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Well, this nonprofit, ERIC, which is a Delaware nonprofit corporation, had 33 states in their system, including red states, where your driver data was just going to left-wing outfits so they would know what's going on. On top of that, Heather Honey wrote this article, the best government data that money can't buy, and that was the decline to register people at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Imagine how hard that would be for us to get. But who declined to register? Those would be low propensity voters, and that information was being shared with Electronic Registration Information Center too. And so they were getting information about who wasn't registered, which is impossible information for the GOP to get. 9 states withdrew because of our lobbying, and Patrice was a big part of that, others were too. And so that was a huge deal, and ERIC's on the run, and there are many litigation strategies that are coming up. The big one is the Federal Data Privacy Protection Act. So we, as citizens, can sue if our data is being misused, like it is here in Michigan, but also perhaps the Trump Department of Justice will follow our lead and file enforcement actions. That's what we're hoping and praying for. If they do, it'll be the end of ERIC. And so that'll basically mean that Zuckerberg is out, the private finance election administration, we can get rid of ERIC, and then we've already gotten rid of the all-in-campus democracy challenge program. So those are huge wins. And on some of the more local things, we noticed that actually as part of the all-in-campus democracy challenge, they had a plan, and part of the plan was to lobby the cities to enact ordinances that required landlords to get their tenants out to vote, which seems strange. Remember, students in these cities tend to vote progressive, right? And so in the cities of Ypsilanti, East Lansing, St. Paul, and Minneapolis, we won First Amendment lawsuits. That was a compelled speech situation. And then what happened was they stopped doing it. So that was another win. And then in Wisconsin, we stopped absentee ballot drop boxes. In the Zuckerberg finance plans through Center for Tech and Civic Life in 2020, part of the money they gave them, there was a condition that they got to install absentee ballot drop boxes. So they were paid for by the Zuckerberg money, but they also identified where they'd be located, and they ensured then that was the drop-off place for all their activities. So those were stopped. I filed 5 lawsuits against the 5 biggest cities that were being funded: Racine, Kenosha, Madison, Milwaukee, and Green Bay, and we won all 5 lawsuits. So 5 of the successes. In April 2024, Wisconsin passed constitutional amendments, no Zuck bucks, and no officials conducting election official duties, which was a big win. Then I got to mention one case in Minnesota, because a lot of the people on the election side say, well, we're about get out to vote and voter registration. And they're really saying your election integrity litigation has to be justified on a net vote basis. Okay, well, that's okay. So some of this, you're stopping ineligible people from voting, that's net vote. Then also, well, we're also concerned about net seat, because if you help us win an election, we went to 1, that might tip a seat. Then the ultimate test is net trifecta. Does your election integrity litigation lead to a change in trifecta status? So in Minnesota, we had a close race that the Republican candidate contacted me and said, I think the the Democratic candidate lives outside the district. So after the election, which was a 67-67 split in the Minnesota State House, I picked up the case, and before a Democratic judge in Ramsey County, in Urban County, we proved that he wasn't a resident, and they had to vacate the election, tipping it towards the Republicans. So there's been a Republican Speaker of the House since the election. Now I'm going to save the best for last. Now why I went through the victories is that I'm going to share with you, and this is very exciting for me, for the first time publicly, an ambitious plan for 2026 election integrity litigation. And so I've consulted with a few people about it, very excited about it, but it's really no resource limitations on it. So it's not about it's about my vision, not about how much money I have, which is fine, right? Because I want to share the vision with you. And so we're going to go through a few of the projects, or virtually all the projects that I've been working on. So let's start with the first slide. You have it up? Next one. So first of all, the first problem we have is the verification vacuum. We just can't verify the election results. It's a big problem. And the federal courts and the federal elections are under this sort of Purcell doctrine, saying we don't want to get involved because we as the court, if we change the rules at the end, then it's unfair to the candidates. That's an obstacle to where we need to go. We need to go to a place where the federal courts issue injunctions before the election to make sure that the election officials perform their federal and state duties as election officials in federal elections. So the federal courts are there, and that's the job they should be doing. Now, have they been doing it? No, and the reason it's needed now is that the left is cheating so bad. So you don't have them do this unless you have to. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court is getting it. Let me explain. To the next slide. Okay, we got to stand tall. This is the biggest win of all. This is amazing. Patrice, Michigan Fair Elections, Wisconsin, and the Pennsylvania Election Integrity Organizations filed a friend of the court brief. A friend of the court brief, 9,000 words, sheets like this, so forth. It's not a big deal, but we had the right words on the paper. So in the Boss case, the federal district court in Illinois and the Seventh Circuit had said that a congressional candidate does not have standing to bring a claim in federal court when the state election officials are violating federal law with regard to a federal election. So heretofore, before this, the only people that really had the right to sue were voters. And this is part of the challenge that we've had, or I've had for years, election integrity litigation, is overcoming this idea that voters can sue for election law violations, but no one else can. And so, vote dilution was not a good argument. They knocked all these arguments down. But Congressman Boss, who was represented by Russ Nobile and the Judicial Watch, got to the U.S. Supreme Court on congressional candidate standing, and we filed an amicus brief, and the issue was, how far would the U.S. Supreme Court go in recognizing congressional candidate standing? And the petition said, well, candidates spend a lot of money, so when the elections change, like you receive after the election ballots or something, it costs the candidate more money. And so our unique argument was that from the business area, there's a doctrine called competitor standing. If Congress has regulated the marketplace to ensure every competitor is treated fairly, if state officials and state laws interfere with that fairness, those federal laws, then the business suffering from the unfair application of state law in violation of the federal law has standing in federal court. And the 5 conservative justices who wrote the majority opinion said that congressional candidates have competitor standing so they can sue state election officials and local election officials whenever they're violating federal and state law regulating federal elections. And so this is so unbelievable that, like, I was telling everyone, like, people are making fun of us because that decision's worth $1 billion, and the amicus brief costs like 10,000. And so the other lawyer says, well, you should have made $500 million on that. Well, that's not the way I operate. So anyway, so that's good. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're not done yet, right? Now we're going to the Boss Watson Pincer strategy. So again, Patrice and the other two organizations are now launching another amicus curiae brief because the U.S. Supreme Court has granted another petition for writ of certiorari in our subject area. And so this case involves, federal law says there's an election date, but 30 states have laws that say you can accept ballots after the election date. So this is really critical to understand that, the left is saying that this is in the amicus curiae brief, the left is saying, Mark Elias and all that an election is sort of like a collection of voter intent. It's like the people cast their ballots, and when they come in, it's fine if they come in after the election, 7 days, 10 days, or whatever. And our side is saying, no. An election date is a consummation of election official duties performing their functions, which conclude on the election date, and then they start counting. So the consummation argument is there are two election duties that are really important. Collecting the ballots and verifying the ballots. And then after the election, you count the ballots. So why this is important, it goes back to the second slide on verification, is that our experience at the state level, and the states have many more elections, state offices, local elections, so forth, than the federal courts would ever have. But our experience is that it's the best to have all the pre-election duties completed by election day, the collection of the ballots and the verification, because once the counting starts, everything changes, because once you start counting ballots, how is an election going to be invalidated by, careless handling, let's say, rejected absentee ballots? So really where where it really hits the fan in a sense is that the courts in states generally describe it this way, and that is before the election official duties prior to election are mandatory. So that means that state election officials, you will collect the ballots, you will verify the ballots before the election date, and if you don't, our state courts are injunction issuing machines. And so now we're going to federal court and saying, you have to change, U.S. Supreme Court. You need to adopt the idea that prior to an election, any one of us can go into federal court and say, these state election officials, these local election officials aren't collecting the ballots right, they're not verifying the ballots right, and the federal courts should be issuing injunctions every time that a violation is presented to them regarding a federal election. That's really critical to understand. That's our contribution. In our brief, we're telling the court, you've got to adopt this so that our federal courts are injunction issuing machines prior to the election regarding pre-election duties. And if we win on that, that's like, wow, 2 grand slams in consecutive, in the same game. So what does it look like after the election? Well, after the election, when they're counting, forget about it. It's now called directory, that you can't fight about pre-election duties after they start counting, because no judge is going to disenfranchise the counted votes because there's an illegality regarding pre-election duties. But you know what? That's pretty good, because if you have the pre-election duties continue after the election, then they know how many votes the other candidate is behind. You see, so you stop it at the election, and then they don't know how to cheat, right? Because they don't know how many votes they need. So the U.S. Supreme Court, through this brief, is going to see that. So the thing to look in the Watson case, the oral argument's in a couple weeks. Do you know, Patrice? It's coming up. Oh, no, okay. So that's coming up. You watch that, then watch the decision. If the court comes down and says, there's this difference between pre-election duties and enforcing in court and the post-election duties, it's such a huge win. We've actually witnessed the third branch of the federal government changing to conform to our election integrity view. It would be quite extraordinary. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is a different topic. The SAVE Act, you've all heard about it. If it gets passed, enacted, none of the liberal attorney generals, including this state, will be enforcing it in the 2026 election. So we need to get ready if the Congress gets, the Senate gets rid of the filibuster, it passes, that we have the litigation to go to federal court to make the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, follow the law. That the non-citizens under federal law would not be eligible to vote, and so we need to go into court and basically enforce it. And with the right data, we could. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's go back to Michigan's legislative usurpation. Many of you recall Senator Lindsay and some state legislators sued because the 2022 Michigan constitutional amendments regulating federal elections and state elections wasn't approved by the state legislature. So the elections clause says that when the states are regulating federal elections, the state legislature needs to be involved. But the Michigan Constitution has two ways to amend the Constitution. One is by citizen petition, the other is by state legislative approval. They didn't do the state legislative approval, so they're out of luck. Now, when we went up with Senator Lindsay and the rest, we weren't. There was an individual state legislator standing theory that we were promoting. At the same time, the congressional candidate standing theory was being promoted by Judicial Watch in the Bloss case. So they got to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they won, which meant that we didn't win, but we won because they won, and now we're going to refile this case with what? Congressional candidates, right? And I love your congressional members. They're fantastic, but I'm just speaking, I'm not running for office, so I can say what I have to say, right? But the congressional members, their offices are wired up to handle negative news. So there's like one little article over here in the whole office, like, oh, we got to be concerned. Well, litigation is controversial, so the congressional members aren't the best partners. So we need our congressional candidates to step up and be our plaintiffs, so we can see these cases through. So we're going to do it. Let's go to the next one. The HAVA administrative due process, this is a big deal in Michigan. There's this great law called Help America Vote Act. It requires each state to have a really good state voter registration system, complete, accurate, all those things. And also it requires the procedures associated with the data to be done very carefully with the updating, including excluding ineligible people from the database. And the way it's enforced is the American people are given the right to file administrative complaints, and Michigan and other states are supposed to provide a procedure for that, a hearing and an adjudication. But in states where it works, like in Pennsylvania and Minnesota, you get an administrative law judge appointed, you have an independent tribunal, they decide the claim, and you win or you lose. In states where it doesn't work, like Wisconsin, Michigan, now Missouri, they don't have processes like that. Michigan has a Bureau of Elections, which is political appointments, and so they just dismiss the cases. They don't have hearings, they don't have adjudications. And so our case in Wisconsin is a case where Wisconsin, like Michigan, doesn't provide hearings and doesn't make adjudications. They just throw them away. And so we've lost in the U.S. District Court. We lost in the Seventh Circuit. Now we're petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court. But Jeff just told me that on last night, right? Last night, a decision came down from the Eastern District of Missouri telling the Secretary of State of Missouri, because he refused to hear a HAVA administrative complaint, you will hear it, and you will give them the hearing, and you will adjudicate it, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, and so this is a huge deal because when I came here, everyone would have said, well, you're crazy. No one's ever won on that. Now, I may still be crazy, but someone's won on that. so we're just plugging along. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, and that one, by the way, I want to say that in that case, the Wisconsin Voter Alliance, Michigan Fair Elections partner, is the main petitioner. So if that's granted, we should all go to DC for the Supreme Court hearing. It'd be a lot of fun. The National Ward and Guardianship Integrity Project, these liberals, they thought of everything. But when you look at this, think of this as adjacent to the Non-Citizen Project. So what we're finding is that with respect to disabled people, particularly people who lack capacity, that the progressives, even if there are specific court orders saying they're ineligible to vote, or like you'd interview them and you know they shouldn't be voting, they're still voting anyway. And so we found in the 2020 election, in major cities in Wisconsin, there was 100% nursing home voting rate. So the Zuckerberg money was being spent to make sure the nursing homes voted at 100%. And as a result of that investigation, many families, like 8 families specifically, invited me to interview the people that had voted in their family. So I was representing the family and the person I was interviewing. And you know, you can watch the videos online, and you know, they shouldn't be voting. The Dane County, that's the big county in Wisconsin around Madison, their clerk was so moved by our investigation, he did a parallel investigation, just took a sample, and found like, it was like 400 people in a sample who were specifically adjudicated not having the right to vote, but were still voting. And so the progressive disabled groups, you know, they don't like me litigating, but when it comes to the specific issue of you've adjudicated this person doesn't have the right to vote, then these states where they continue to vote, I mean, there's no more humane way you can handle it than having a judge ask the questions like, do you know what an election is? Do you know what a vote means? I mean, there's a test for that. And so the progressives don't say much about it because, well, I'm right, and everyone would agree with me that there's no greater protection than the right to vote than to have a judge asking those questions. And so that's a national litigation strategy, and particularly wherever the guardianship information is confidential, be assured that progressives are cheating. And so here, without any regulation at all, we need to look into some reform legislation. Let's go to the next one. I mentioned this before on the ERIC data privacy and DPPA enforcement. If the U.S. Department of Justice would file an enforcement action to protect your driver privacy protected information in Michigan, then what we could follow up with is a nifty class action lawsuit and get you some damages for that privately, because they shouldn't be misusing your data like that. And the federal law says if they misuse your data, they have to pay you money, like a sanction. It's like a fine, like it's $2,500 per occurrence. And they're just hitting that data every month, so it'd be a lot of money for each of you. But it's a very serious, and it seems like that the progressives have gotten away with it so long because we haven't challenged it sufficiently. But the problem, of course, when you sue Electronic Registration Information Center, that's backed by even now 24 states and Mark Elias and all that, so they're worthy opponents. But if the Department of Justice can do it, so can we. All right, let's go to the next one. On the UOCAVA equal protection and verification, this is crazy, but you know, when we talk about overseas voters, everyone wants to think about the military. Thank God for the military. But the most overseas citizens are not military. And so sad to say that a lot of people go overseas and they don't renounce their citizenship because it costs a couple $1,000. You got to go to the embassy and you got to sign a piece of paper. And they also end up not paying their taxes because, well, why did they move overseas, right? And so you have people who are not paying their taxes but are still citizens because they haven't renounced their citizenship. And then the progressives see this, wow, this is like potentially millions of votes. And then also the states can have such loose rules that people overseas can like pick their state, like where they vote, Pennsylvania, Michigan, the swing states. So it's a really sort of big pool of votes out there. And how they vote is called the Uniform Overseas Military Voting Act, UOCAVA. And so what they do is these votes come in and they're treated differently than regular votes regarding verifying eligibility. And UOCAVA requires the Social Security number be on the postcard or some alternative form of identification. But in Pennsylvania, they were publishing data that Heather Honey found on a daily basis. And so for all the regular votes that could not be verified, they were put in a pending category. And maybe like 2% ended up in the pending category or whatever. But with respect to the tens of thousands of UOCAVA votes, there were 0 in the pending category, meaning that they were all just approved without any verification. because there weren't, if there were a verification process and they failed, then the county personnel would follow up to help them qualify as a voter. And so 0 verification in Pennsylvania on overseas voters. So that means that you could be Mickey Mouse and just go right through. And that was happening before the election, and after the election, because after the election receipt. Let's go to the next one. Oh, the National Campus Neutrality and Student Privacy. I mentioned the All-In Campus Democracy Program, and there has been this success with the Department of Education going after the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act violations by these 1,000 campuses involved in the All-In Campus Democracy Program. But it goes a little deeper than that with respect to the legal problem here, and that is generally, can a state like Michigan at public universities spend resources targeting university students to vote? I mean, to me, that's just like, that's ridiculous, because yeah, we want people to vote, but you should not target a demographic group. And in Michigan, you find that most of the liberal university campuses are signed up, but not the ones in the more conservative areas, and maybe a few of the technical colleges in the big cities, but not most of the technical colleges. So it kind of tracks like whether they're Republican or Democratic voters. And so putting pressure on the University of Michigan systems, saying, hey, you gotta treat all voters the same, and that means that you can't just target your university students. That's not fair to students at non-participating universities, and certainly isn't fair to non-students. So non-college graduates. So the non-college graduates I know, well, wait a minute, they give their loans forgiven and mine aren't? And then they say, well, they focus on them voting, but they don't focus on me voting. This is a real problem that we have, is that the government's gotten the taste of spending resources targeting demographic groups to vote. And okay, private money, fine, but government money targeting certain demographics to vote, that should be constitutionally forbidden. So those are equal protection challenges to come. The voting machine failure certification and testing, the L&A testing, there should be rigorous pre-election logic and accuracy testing. So, if you've been around long enough, like some of us, you realize that it's not hard to collect facts that counter the official narrative that machines always work. So Leelanau County, they announced after the first count that all the Democrat candidates won, and then after the election or the canvassing, they admitted that they had left the sort of logic and analysis votes in there, which apparently were all for the Democrats, and they were caught, they had to correct everything, and then it ended up being a Republican victory. But that's important to note, like when there's a human glitch, it's always in favor of the Democrats, and you only find if there's a glitch if you find it out, right? And so it's really important to understand that the machines can have human glitches. Now, when you're good at it though, you say, oh, okay, that's the clerk. Maybe the clerk made an honest mistake. But then we go to Northampton County in Pennsylvania, and they're still using the touchscreen machines. And so the touchscreen machines, print up a receipt of who you voted for. And there are the machines in 2023 they were publishing that you voted for the opposite candidate. So the receipt said, hey, you're voting for the other person. So people were trying to hit the other button to vote for the right person, and they kept doing it. And eventually they had to shut the polls down because they didn't have enough paper ballots. So in the end, the only person that could be blamed was the voting machine company. And the voting machine company came out, the representative, and said there was a software glitch. That's why it was. And oh, by the way, the printed receipts, you don't have to worry because there was a barcode. And then they said the barcode would have been read correctly by the tabulator. So we litigated this through the HAVA administrative complaint process that works in Pennsylvania with Heather Honey taking the lead. And we got all the way to the 7-member Commonwealth Court. And we were arguing, actually my colleague Elizabeth Nielsen was arguing, that this was wrong, we got to get rid of these machines. And they were arguing it was just a voting machine company programming error, nothing to worry about. And then Elizabeth was honing in and saying, this is like the receipts were wrong. And they came, and she said, these barcodes, who can read a barcode? And then the other side got up and said, we can teach people how to read barcodes. They can verify their ballots. And so that was the result of that, and it was really crazy. And the point, though, of that case was to document that the machines are susceptible to programming errors, and then the court accepted that, but said we're not going to require the new machines yet. And so they want to have another round of mistakes in the group. But those machines, by the way, those machines are used in Pennsylvania only in the most urban and progressive districts like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, some areas around Philadelphia. So the machine thing is really serious. I talked to Jeff. He's saying that Michigan's going to buy some new machines, and Jeff was saying that we're going to really push for the software to be open, transparent, so everyone can know what's going on with the machine, and then they won't be able to. We won't have these glitches anymore, right? And remember, the glitches always go in the Democrat direction, at least the ones I've seen. So let's go next one. All right, post-election monitoring and ballot contests. This is more traditional, but we need to do a far better job of forming legal teams and deterring harassment of our people, ostracization and so forth. We got to streamline, mainstream election observers and the jobs they do in election litigation. They've done a good job of terrorizing election lawyers and anyone interested in election integrity, but we stood tall and we're fighting back. And it's going to even be required more because they're going to continue to be close elections, which then relates, I think, to the final slide. Yeah, this is the election participant protection programs. Let's move to the next slide. And then 2020 GOP election counter lawfare and restoration. So we're working with the 2020 Michigan electors. We're hoping that the counter lawfare litigation on behalf of electors starts in Michigan. I met with a few of them tonight, and we're hoping that we can teach the Attorney General Nessel and the people that we're working with her, like States United Democracy Center, a George Soros-funded group that appears to have been guiding them all the way. So they had a contract, the Soros-funded States United Democracy Center, with the Attorney General, and we know from publicly available documents, the Judicial Watch site, that same group deals where the other prosecutions occurred in Wisconsin and in Arizona. So the one nonprofit had contracts with the Arizona Attorney General prosecuted, the Wisconsin Attorney General prosecuted, and the Michigan Attorney General prosecuted, and they're looking at Georgia too. I'm not sure of the information there. But the point is wash, rinse, and repeat, right? Who was the moving force behind the prosecutions in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia? George Soros-backed States United Democracy Center. So we're investigating that and coming through. I just think it's horrible when we kind of know that these Soros-backed groups have been involved in Attorney General civil litigation, but for them to be in a position to pull the trigger on criminal prosecution, I mean, that's just wrong. I mean, we can't have progressive groups running the prosecutor's office operations against conservatives and Republicans like this. So we're going to get to the bottom of that, and we're excited about that, and we'll have some more meetings about that. And so I think in summary, it's been extraordinary, the road that we've taken. Now, granted, when I started doing this more intensely in the 2020 election, I had already set myself on the course of suing the government for a living. Everyone back 25 years ago laughed at me, but I made a career out of it now. The difficulty of the practice, we now have what I think my partner and I have 7 lawyers, 1 paralegal on staff total, including ourselves. But the difficulty is that generally the clients only have 1 lawsuit against the government in a lifetime, as opposed to a big corporation where I could just continue to get lawsuits. So it's a crazy way to sort of make a living and having kids and all that. But it's really worked out. And one of the reasons it's worked out is I've met so many good people who want to help do this. And so I just want to explain a little bit of what I just talked to you about. So just this little bit. But in order to do this well, you really need to understand that there are 3 branches of government, and we need to work over each branch of government on a project basis to get things done. So if you think about many of the ideas I presented here, you know, if we could find a legislature that would help us, then we don't have to do the litigation, right? Because that's cheaper. If sometimes the litigation's cheap, and you file a lawsuit and maybe you win in the court, other times you may have to advocate in some different way, and you just kind of figure out, you know, you do as much as you can with the resources you have, but if you work really hard and you have some resources, you can accomplish a lot. Now, the alignment with the U.S. Supreme Court and the majority, that's pretty rare. I mean, you're talking like civil rights stuff. I mean, it's like to align for Michigan fair elections, to align with the Supreme Court in such a way to change the law to open the federal courthouse door to congressional candidates suing state and local election officials, to then making, in the Watson case, the federal courts injunction issuing machines before the federal elections for the purpose of pre-election duties of collection and verification of ballots. And then third, and this will blow me away, but it could happen, is if we go to the U.S. Supreme Court and win on the HAVA administrative complete procedure, you in this room, Michigan Fair Elections, people in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, in my view, have changed the world because we've changed the way that the members of Congress and the president are selected. You agree? I'll make it better. And you might say that's a crazy dream, but we're like one and a half steps there. We won the Boss case. We got to win the Watson case. We got to get the HAVA administrative complaint procedure petition to the U.S. Supreme Court granted. If that were granted, the hearing would be next fall, and the decision would be out in the spring, in time for the 2028 election cycle. And I tell you, I talked to Jeff, talked to Patrice, if we get the HAVA administrative complaint procedure victory from the U.S. Supreme Court, in Michigan, like every 14 days, we'll be filing HAVA administrative complaints because we've already identified about 100 things wrong with how the Michigan Secretary of State handles things contradicting federal law. So anyway, we take a few questions?
Yes.
Okay, let's take, anyone have a question about all that stuff?
Can you just explain a little more? The amicus brief in the Boss case, they actually used your language. That's a whole level of...
Right, in the Boss case, we had an analogy that the Congress had said that a fair competition means that receipts are received before election day. So what if you were in a race and the rules were it's 100 meters, and then all of a sudden someone says, no, it's 120 meters. Well, that's not fair because you trained for 100 meters. So these states that were saying that you can receive ballots after the election date were forcing candidates to run a different campaign than the federal law required. And then, so that was a competitor injury. So that ended up in Chief Justice Roberts' opinion. And so that's why, you can just kind of take all the petitions and take the petitions and the responses and the advocacy briefs, put them in your notebook LM or whatever, and say, how did the court know about the competitor injury argument? And they say there's one brief that argued it, and that was our brief. So, it's not really intended to draw attention to me. It's really like, the idea is that the group wanted to do it, and they had a vision, and we succeeded. And then in the Watson case, we're doing the same thing. Like our amici brief, this has been confirmed, is the only brief saying, hey, look at all these states with respect to state court jurisdiction regarding elections. All the court says, come to us for injunctions prior to the election for pre-election duties of collection and verification. Don't come to us after the election because there's nothing we can do for you. And so the reason why it's so important to use that law is the federal courts are right now following a rule, the Purcell Doctrine, that says we don't make decisions right before the election. Well, that's exactly when they should be doing it because that's when they're cheating. Yeah. It's right before the election. That's where they... go ahead, sir.
How do other states, because I traveled to states and I've gone to Connecticut for election integrity, that's your guys' number one issue. How do you see that with other states? Because other states are affected by what happens in these states that are affected.
Yeah, that's right. There's a few things here about I call it the return on investment slide rule. So first of all, like you live in a state where we make infinite investments because it's a close state, it determines presidential elections. But with respect to the blue states, election integrity is really important because of a lot of blue states have red House seats that determine whether the Congress is going to be red or blue. With respect to the blue states that are completely blue, they still need to be concerned about election integrity, and we counsel them with respect to that, the importance of it. And I think part of it is the progressives are trying to change the Democratic Party too, so they don't even tolerate moderate Democrats anymore. So there's a lot of reason to be involved. I think that just generally, when you look at the electronic registration information states, like including California, they introduce a lot of the bad ideas in the deep blue states. Then they come to places like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and when they get the chance, they incorporate them. But if they don't have the legislature in Wisconsin, then they just do it at the agency level, Wisconsin Election Commission. So in those progressive blue states, I think it's really important to call them out when they're not using the lawmaking process. And so I think that's important. Now, the big message to people in the blue states is that you're all interested in the swing states performing well in this regard because the presidential elections turn on the swing states. Go ahead.
Thank you for coming here. I appreciate you coming to Michigan. I wanted to ask, I've not been able to wrap my head around why if my name is on the ballot as a precinct delegate, I cannot be counting, or working that precinct or counting the ballots because my name's on the ballot. So how is it that Jocelyn Benson can be on the ballot for governor and she's in charge of the election?
Yeah, no, I think that certainly is an issue. I think on it needs to be looked at. I think there's a real issue in Michigan of whether you can get the documents. Because the FOIA doesn't seem to work too good here with respect to getting the documents. So, for example, I did mention this, but in Arizona, we have the contract with States United Democracy Center and the Arizona Attorney General and the memo that was the moving force. It was like a memo listing the 2020 Trump delegates. It was a memo from States United Democracy Center, Soros Funded Group, to the Attorney General. Here's the crime. Here are their names. Here are the crimes they committed. Charge them. But it wasn't like a citizen filing a report. They were under contract with the State Attorney General's office to do that. So in Michigan, we got the contract, but we didn't get the memo. So it's really important to get that memo, but it's being requested by Judicial Watch, but we don't have the memo yet. But because why would they do it in Arizona, not in Michigan? It's like in Arizona they had a prosecution, in Michigan they had a prosecution. The same thing in Wisconsin, they had a prosecution, a contract, and there's a memo. So Michigan seems to be a little slow. They don't seem too concerned about the circuit court punishing them in that regard. But anyway, Judicial Watch is on top of that, and we're working in Wisconsin to get more documents too. But yeah, I think that's what you need to do, file a lawsuit against Benson in that regard, is to actually get a hold of what she's doing. Yeah, she's doing it, and so you just need to get the documents showing she's doing it. One more question? Patrice.
Well, I'd just like to say, Secretary of State Benson filed 40 new election rules 6 weeks after she decided she was going to run for governor. And those rules are supposed to be announced on July 1st the year before. And they did not. They waited till 6 weeks after she announces, and 40 new rules. And one of those new rules says that if you are a clerk, you cannot check the eligibility of an overseas civilian registrant.
Yeah.
And that went into force February 23rd, and it has the force of law in Michigan.
Wow. Yeah. Another thing, okay, so we're among friends and family here, but we do need to do a better job of using Michigan courts. So I had recommended that somebody in Michigan file a lawsuit regarding the open Senate seat in Eastern Michigan. Was it Bay City?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that lawsuit should have been filed the first day that the governor delayed. Because you see how the governor pushed it to the very, very end, the latest date. So if we had filed the lawsuit because of the political pressure, it would have caved and you would have had the election earlier. I just think whenever these political types are violating election law, and we give them a chance to correct, but then we should find a way to litigate it. And that's part of the reason why these standing issues are so important. The HAVA administrative complaint procedure is important, because they're going to continue to cheat unless you call them to account in some sort of tribunal. So thank you very much.
So hold on 1 second. So correct me, it's been a little while since I've thought about this, but with the Michigan legislative usurpation lawsuit, and I think that, going forward now and using congressional candidates, that we have a chance through that lawsuit to overturn the 2018, I think it's Prop
3.
Which is it?
2018 Prop 3, 2000.
Prop 3 and 2022 Prop 2. I mean, just think about this. This is huge. And it's like, your list is so long, but to me, that is like enormous in the state of Michigan. Because with it, they have, same day absentee, 9 days of early voting. Pretty much they gutted, really signature verification. I mean, it's so much that would help clean up Michigan elections. Now, tell me if I'm getting ahead of my skis, though, but I believe that a donor has pledged a bit of money. Right. If we can match that money. And so, who here would not say, you know what, that is worth it so much to me to help save Michigan that I'm going to pledge $500 or I'm going to pledge $1,000 because this lawsuit could actually overturn 2022 and 2018. Don't you think it would be worth it?
Yeah, so I think the number was 25,000 that we need to raise locally in the state, and then we could do the lawsuit. Now, one of the reasons we could do the lawsuit, there's a $25,000 match. So we raised 25,000 locally. We have a match of 25,000. Now, the reason why that lawsuit can be done relatively inexpensively is already done it once, in the sense of the state legislator lawsuit. Michigan Fair Elections was involved in financing that. And so we can just substitute the congressional candidates for the state legislative candidates and file the same lawsuit in federal court. But the good news is, and this is like we're trying to play 3D chess with the resources we have, and we're against the Soros-funded Mark Elias groups. But the Watson case ends up being pretty important here, because the Watson case says that the federal election date is the date, and that's the consummation, it all ends there. Then the Michigan Constitution, constitutional amendments and the state law that incorporates the constitutional amendments violate the Watson case. So one of the defects that they brought up in the arguments in the Lindsay case was, well, Curtal, if you get rid of the state constitutional amendments, you have these state laws incorporating the state constitutional amendments. Got it? But if the U.S. Supreme Court comes down and says no, pre-election activities after the election date, both the state constitutional amendment and the state laws have that defect. So you can go in on that claim and say, oh, under the U.S. Supreme Court opinion, you lose both the state constitutional amendment and on the state law. Oh, and by the way, throughout the 2018 and 22 constitutional amendments, because they were never approved by the legislature. So again, it's like, can we, for a small amount of resources, get huge change? And that's exciting. So we get rid of the state law regarding pre-election duties after the election, but you get rid of all the constitutional amendments. So when we get that red trifecta, you're just amending the state laws, repealing the bad laws, and then you don't have to worry with amending the Constitution. And I don't know what they spend on getting the Constitution amendments passed. Probably
about $6 million.
Yeah, $6 million. So it's like, okay, so we pull together 25,000, have the donor match, and then we end up negating their $6 million investment. That'd be fun, right?
When do they need that by?
Yeah, I think well, that's up to you. I think really, I'm the type of person who obviously, his glass is not only half full, but completely full all the time. But anyway, I think that the point would be that you'd want to anticipate the US Supreme Court coming on your side on Watson. So in order to impact the 2026 election, you'd want to file in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then force the US District Court to decide like immediately through a preliminary injunction motion. And if that's not granted, then you go to the Sixth Circuit. But, the Elections Clause says that when the state is regulating federal elections, the state legislature has to approve it. So, what are these people thinking, not going through that process? But, again, when they want something, they're willing to cheat, and they cheated the legislature out of their vote. Now, I do think it's interesting, because the PR wasn't all that positive, but after the Watson case comes down, I think it shifts because they're violating the U.S. Supreme Court opinion. I mean, it's just like there. I mean, it's just like, oh, Watson said everything's got to be done on the election date, and Michigan continues. And 30 other states do too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Mary, I just have a suggestion. We got a convention coming up with 2,000 delegates.
Yep.
We can put a voluntary tax on the $50 payment that we have to all pay. Put $10 on there, volunteers to check $10 or something like this. We could buy start a program with Jim and actually be there as well for something of this nature.
I'm not sure, like, if that would fly. Now, I had a little bit of an advantage. 2 years.
By the way, thank you for mentioning Senator Lindsay, my best friend. He represents my district. So thank you.
Yeah, he's awesome. He was. I talked to him a couple weeks ago. I think he would have the same recollection of the conversation. You'd ask him to confirm, but he was real champ about losing, and then I called him up and said, no, actually, we won the Boss case. It literally, there were 2 competing standing theories. Basically, the one being, well, the U.S. Supreme Court already said a legislature could sue state election officials if the state election officials weren't following the law regarding federal elections. And so then the next step would be, well, if you're in a state with a blue legislature, they're not going to sue the blue Secretary of State who's cheating. So that causes a checkerboard pattern of enforcement against state elected officials who violate election law, and the red legislatures sue, the blue legislatures don't. And so that was a good theory, but meanwhile, Judicial Watch was sponsoring this theory of congressional candidates, and you kind of check which one do you think's best, because you can't sue under their theory either, right? Because you're not a congressional candidate, right? So they had to pick someone to sue, and they weren't going to say the general public can sue. And so I really believe that our decision set the platform, and there was an individual legislator lawsuit in both here in Michigan and one in Pennsylvania. And so they both had gone up the 3rd and 6th Circuit respectively, and we both petitioned the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court granted in the Boss case and said congressional candidate standing. So that was all part of a sort of a strategy. Now, in a better world, the people right of center, the lawyers and so forth, would be really coordinated like that. But that was the best example of coordination I have for you on the right with respect to that kind of litigation strategy. Because we were coming up the 3rd and 6th Circuit, they came up the 7th Circuit, and the U.S. Supreme Court chose the congressional candidate standing. So I talked to Mr. Lindsay, Senator Lindsay, he was like really pleased that it all kind of worked out. So, and he's very supportive of restarting the litigation with the congressional candidates. And, you guys really, when you go home, just read the election clause, read Michigan Constitution Article 12, and say, Colonel's right. If you're gonna amend the Michigan Constitution to regulate federal elections, you got to use the process that includes the state legislature. I mean, because that's what the federal Constitution says. So it's not really like a civil rights issue. It's like you got to follow the rules if you want your laws regulating federal elections to apply. So.
Thank you. So just to summarize, so if you want to help with this lawsuit, and I believe that it's just so important. It's like legislature determines time, place, and manner of elections, not a ballot initiative. The ballot initiatives are an illegal process. So if you want to help with this, which could change the future of Michigan, for your children, your grandchildren. I believe the right place to make the donations is to Michigan Fair Elections. Am I right on that, Patrice? That would go to supporting this legal work, right?
Can you send that in an email?
I will send that in an email and a little bit more details about this.
So we know what to do.
Yes.
Can't they just take pledges at the convention?
Well, you know, I was going to say, so like 2 years ago, I was grassroots vice chair. I was given the microphone in every district. So I took advantage of that. And I think we raised a little bit of money, didn't we, Patrice, for Michigan Fair Elections for this usurpation?
Yes, we did.
So I don't know if I would have that advantage or if anybody would, but I can certainly reach out to Jim Runstead and ask him if that's something that he would allow us to do. I mean, he'd be on board with this. I just don't know if that could happen at this convention. So anyway, thank you so much. Your work is so incredible, Eric. The man who makes a living off of suing the government. Okay, so here we are at our announcements. So as we, you guys know, we got this Senate district race in District 35. So they have 3 Super Saturdays events coming up to help Jason Tooney win this critical Senate seat. We cannot go back to letting the Democrats control the legislature. It costs us all way too much. So if you have time, you can do this even by making phone calls to help help Jason Tooney.
Yep.
So
Period.
their get out the vote is March 28th, April 11th, and April 25th. The election, I think, is May 5th.
Yes.
So you can go to TooneyForSenate.com to sign up to help with phone calling, or if you're able to spare the time to go up there and knock doors. But TooneyForSenate.com to help. It's really critical that we take that seat. And Jason Tooney is a really great candidate too. He's a great guy. Besides the fact that, tell me your date again.
April 10th.
Ben, April 10th is the gubernatorial debate. If you can't make the April 10th, which is only $20.
Only $20.
$20. Okay, OCRP is holding a gubernatorial debate April 30th, 6 to 9 p.m. Panelists include Charlie LaDuff, Jackie Page. It's going to be moderated by Charlie Langton. Tickets are $50. The debate's going to take place somewhere in Auburn Hills, but they're reluctant to actually give out the location due to just precautionary reasons. It will come out, I believe, after you register. So that's another opportunity that you will have to hear these candidates and hear what they have to say about what they plan to do when they get into office.